How's it going, my RWBY friends? It's about that time of the day, or of the month, I guess. I don't know. I make these randomly. Character breakdown time. Let's just go with that. This time, Yang Xiaolong. Skipped her, went right to Ren and Jaune. Still haven't done Nora. I forget why that happened. I think it's because the character shorts were coming out or something. Or I think, like, the Jaune theory that we made was confirmed about his semblance. It was basically confirmed. It was slightly different, but still. And then I wanted to do his character breakdown. Anyways, here's the Yang Xiaolong character breakdown. If you're not familiar with my character breakdown series, we basically ramble on, go into extreme detail about a specific character. This time, Yang. We're going to go over things like her fights, her history, her semblance, her fighting style even, and her weaponry, all the good stuff. Everything about Yang Xiaolong in this video. We will cover it. And we're going to start with the history. But before we do that, I want to mention something really quick. My Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood video was taken down. If you were watching that, I apologize. It was copyrighted. So I got to deal with that now, but we're not going to discuss that in this video. This is a Yang character breakdown, so let's get into it. Anyways, Yang was born on Patch. You probably already know some of this stuff, but we're going to go over it. The point of this kind of video is just to listen to it. It's RWBY content. It's a lot of, you know, it's good stuff, man. So Yang was born on Patch. She helped raise RWBY once Summer disappeared. And for quite a significant amount of time, Yang was doing both the mother role and the father role. Because after Raven left Taiyang, Tai was kind of reclusive and he withdrew. And he wasn't really helping Yang raise RWBY. Yang was still very young herself and she definitely needed a father figure. And Tai wasn't really there for her. Now, I'm not saying Tai was a bad father. I'm just saying for a period of time, Tai really was not active in parenting. After he got over that somewhat, he definitely took more of an active role. But by that time, Yang was more grown up. And while they still needed a father figure, of course, you know, you go off to primary school, you start training. So it was less and less important. Fact is, Yang picked up a lot of that slack. But at the same time, she doesn't hold resentment towards Taiyang. I'm going to go over that more in the segment where we discuss specific relationships with Yang and other characters. But, you know, we might as well cover it here slightly. She doesn't resent Tai for this at all. She understands what he went through. And they have a very good relationship still, even though Yang had to go through all that with RWBY and whatnot. So Yang eventually, you know, she's always wanted to figure out what happened to Raven. Why Raven left. Why Raven like does the thing that the things that she does. Being a huntress, Yang knows that huntresses and huntsmen are pretty esteemed. Now there are some that, you know, will take up missions that may involve things like kidnapping or things that are illegal, basically. So you do have a choice when you're a huntsman or a huntress, but still, Yang associates being a huntsman and a huntress with more so esteemable things. So she always wanted to wonder like what Raven's reasoning was, why Raven left, what exactly is Raven's goal, and what exactly is she doing that was so important that she couldn't raise her own daughter. So yeah, those were the events leading up to Beacon Academy. Trained at Signal, went to Beacon, all that jazz. You know the deal. Let's go on to the personality segment, but of course I need a sip of coffee real quick. And I do mean sip because this is extremely hot. Let me take one more sip because I can't drink much of this at once. So, all right, personality. So this is actually a pretty interesting segment to cover for Yang. Yang is very confident and straightforward. She's always been the type of girl to speak her mind without really giving much thought. Not the kind of person who is like wants to say something but thinks to themselves like, if I say this, what are they going to think about it? Is it going to be a dumb thing to say? Should I not say that? Complete opposite. Yang is not like that at all. If she has something to say, she will say it. She will tell you to your face what she believes in. Now, after the events of Volume 3, that changed slightly, but she's still a fiery personality type girl. She also has a nurturing side. Again, as we've seen with RWBY, she definitely like wants to take care of those around her, but she also wants to be taken care of as well. As such, when she was injured and lost her arm, Blake ran away, and she took that very personally because she wanted Blake to be there for her. So, you know, she is strong and she is nurturing, but there is a side of Yang that also wants people to care for her as well. So she's actually a fairly diverse character, but definitely her personality traits lean more towards being extroverted, outgoing, fiery, and so on and so on and so on. Now, in the past, she relied a lot on anger to get things done, but that definitely did change since Volume 3. She's matured a lot, but she still still has the side of her that makes her Yang. You know, she's goofy, likes to make puns, likes to joke around and stuff. We even see her doing that with Ooblik and Port in Tai when she just barely was getting over her PTSD, and she still isn't over it even in Volume 5, but this was in Volume 4. We had that scene with Taiyang and Port and Ooblik, which in the show, that was many months, you know, before the events of Volume 5. So a lot has happened, and she definitely is moving on with her PTSD, but it's still something that you can see. For example, in the Bandit Tribe fight, she was shaking. Even like the guy making her upset, the bandit making her upset, when she was getting water from the gas station looking place. She was kind of getting a little PTSD there. Again, at Haven, when Mercury grabbed onto her arm, you could see the rage in her eyes. Her eyes turned red. She was about ready to fight. But showing that character development, that personality development, Yang calmed herself down. Her eyes went back to that normal purple, and she, instead of fighting Mercury, took the opportunity, released the arm, got away, went after Raven. So she's definitely maturing. She's definitely changing her mindset, but she still does struggle with the PTSD. She still is a little bit brash. And Tai Yang himself even said that he didn't think that Yang was ready to move on from the cons of her personality that caused her to lose her arm in the first place. When Yang had the additional training with Tai Yang, when she left, Tai still said that he didn't think she was quite ready, but she still left anyway, and he wasn't going to stop her. You know, time is of the essence, and it's a good thing that Yang did leave because they certainly needed her. If Yang didn't leave at that time, Weiss probably would have still been at the bandit camp, stuck there. Team RWBY would not have had Yang. I'm sorry, Team RWBY and Team, Juniper without Pyrrha. I'm sorry, Pyrrha. And Crow, Oscar, Osman. They wouldn't have had Weiss. They wouldn't have had Yang there. Things would have been a lot different, man. They would have been a lot different, and probably would have been bad. They definitely needed those characters there to help out. So that's about it for Yang's personality, though. So we'll move on to the weapon segment of the character breakdown. So Yang's weapon, the famous Ember Celica, dual gauntlets with shotguns that she can use for momentum to attack her enemies, to augment her attacks, and to even use for mobility to get around. If she's running somewhere, she can jump up, fire both Ember Celicas, and launch herself forward. Now, as of Volume 5, or Volume 4 even, or even Volume 3, you could say, to be honest, she only has one Ember Celica gauntlet. It's no longer a pair of gauntlets. One of them's gone. One of them is still at Beacon Academy. Some Grim is chomping on it. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. I mean, it was freaking might be, dude. Her arm might be there still, but they're cleaning up. I don't know, dude. Someone may have found Ember Celica and Yang's arm just sitting there. We don't really know for sure. Fact is, she doesn't have the other gauntlet. Maybe down the road she'll get it again, but it seems kind of irrelevant now that she has the new cybernetic arm, commissioned from Ironwood himself with the most up-to-date Atlas technology, made as quick as possible and sent over to her. So that's actually a pretty interesting thing to talk about, is Ironwood and Yang's relationship, which we'll get into again during the personality. I'm not the personality, but the relationship segment of this video, and we'll cover that. But let's talk about the cybernetic arm a little bit. So it is quite a bit different than Ember Celica. Obviously, Ember Celica is a gauntlet that goes on your arm. The cybernetic arm is an entirely, replaceable arm. It is it's a mechanical cybernetic arm. It is very powerful. It hits very strong. We saw Yang knock Tai back. He blocked the hit. He stumbled backwards, and he said the arm really does pack a punch. And he was like rubbing his arm after. And if I recall correctly, even like the next day, he complained about it still being like bruised up, kind of. But he was joking, but at the same time, I think there's a little bit of truth there. I think he actually did still feel a little bit the next day, which is kind of crazy to think about. But Ty's an older dude, when you get older, you don't heal as quickly as you do when you're younger. So, I mean, that might be part of it too, to be honest, assuming that remnant, biology works the same as IRL biology, which it probably doesn't, obviously, because it's a whole different world. But, I mean, there might be some correlations there. Anyway, let's sip a coffee and we'll continue. The cybernetic arm also has a little gun in it, which I really wish they didn't add, to be honest. I think that lamed the arm down, dude, because in RWBY, weapons have a history of just being absolutely weak and underpowered and really doing nothing at all. I mean, like, very rarely do we see weapons used in RWBY that actually do something. By do something, I mean even just be a distraction, let alone cause actual damage. Almost never has a gun in RWBY caused actual damage, besides like Roman's, Kane, that actually had pretty good damage output. Other weapon, like ranged guns, not very many. RWBY knocked Leo's aura down with her sniper. That was pretty good. But there's really not that many feats for weapons that actually did damage. Nora's grenade launcher kind of shook the knuckle off a little bit, distracted it, But like I said, not many feats for weapons doing like really good things. I'm sorry, for guns doing good things. Obviously, weapons is a whole different thing. So yeah, I think Yang's weapon, her cybernetic arm, would have been cooler if it didn't have the gun in it, because I don't know, it just felt like perfect the way it was. And then you saw that little tiny gun come out. It's like, really, dude? Really? Even her arm has to be a gun? I would rather it not be, to be honest. But that's just my opinion. Maybe there'll be merit to it down the road. But so far, the gun in her arm, not impressed with that at all. If anything, like I said, it made me a little bit less impressed with the arm overall, which is kind of funny because it should be the opposite. It should be like, whoa, there's a gun in that. That's cool. But it's like, nah, dude. It's like, there's a gun in that? Oh, lame. Okay, never mind. That's part of why I like freaking like Raven's weapon so much, her Odachi. There's no gun aspect to it. It's just straight up, an Odachi. But yeah, I could easily talk about Raven's weapon for a long time, but I don't want to get too derailed here. So let's move on to the next area of this character breakdown, and that area is going to be the fighting styles. So this is actually really interesting. Yang is definitely a boxing dominant style. There's a lot of inspiration from boxing in her fighting style, obviously. However, that said, if you really look at Yang's fights, and go back to the yellow trailer, look at her fights in volume 1, 2, and 3. Look at the yellow trailer. Her fighting style in the yellow trailer is a lot different. Her fighting style in the yellow trailer is actually a lot more similar to her fighting style in volume 4 and volume 5 specifically. Basically, what I'm getting at is in the yellow trailer, Yang used a lot of kicks. She used actually like a few throws even at times. And she just had a much more varied style. She did have some boxing movements like the bob and weave and whatnot. She was like pretty good at feinting and blocking attacks, parrying attacks and everything. But she used a lot of kicks and a lot of other movements that were not related to boxing at all. It's interesting because after the yellow trailer, every fight that we have of Yang, again, in volume 1, 2, and 3 specifically, it's like her style got worse. Now, there is a pretty obvious reason for that, and that's that the trailers, the red, black, yellow, and white trailers were specifically made to showcase these characters, to hype the show up as a whole, and to get you invested in like these awesome fights and these awesome characters and this awesome story. Well, you didn't know much about the story, but the awesome, at the time you didn't know much about the story, but this awesome world that just looked cool. So yeah, they made Yang flashier in the yellow trailer because it was a showcase. But they still, even if it was a showcase, it doesn't negate the fact that they did indeed nerf her fighting style after the yellow trailer. It's like, you know, they legit nerfed her fighting style. But I said there's merit to it. That's the reasoning why. And then luckily, after her additional training with Taiyang, her style in Volume 5, and you could even say Volume 4, but really Volume 5, because that's where her fights were, they're a lot more reminiscent of how her fights were in the yellow trailer. I just want to be sure I'm recording audio right now, because if I'm not, that'd be really bad. But I am. Okay, we're good. Okay. So yeah, we'll continue to see how her style develops as she continues on. I personally would like if she does get that more varied style as she had in the yellow trailer. You can keep like a boxing motif, but I would be happy if she's like 60% boxing, 40% other styles, because like, you know, I think having her fully boxing, like 80 or 90% boxing and like 10 or 20% other stuff is just not going to be interesting enough. I think boxing is awesome, but in a fantasy world like RWBY, I don't think like straight boxing is the most interesting thing, especially like a hand-to-hand character like Yang can definitely incorporate other styles and have much more interesting looking choreographed fights than just like straight boxing style, which is just going to be punches, maybe clinching here and there, you know, some good head movements and arm movements, and some good footwork, but not like throwing kicks ever. You never throw a kick in boxing. You just don't do that. So one more sip on coffee. One sec. Okay, so the next segment is going to be her fights. I actually have a different tab for that, so I'm gonna have to pull that up here. And I have a whole list of her fights. I don't know how many of these we're gonna go into great detail because there's a lot of repetition. But yeah, so the first fight that she ever had, of course, is the yellow trailer. And I've already covered this like indirectly by talking about her fighting style being so different in the yellow trailer. But yeah, it was a good showcase of her abilities, man. She took on a lot of those henchmen. She even beat Melanie and Militia. She had a harder time against Militia because Monty wanted her to struggle against a kicking-based opponent, which this is what I like about the yellow trailer. And I'm kind of going to be repeating myself slightly, but the yellow trailer, she was a boxing dominant character who struggled with kicks, but she still had a varied enough style that it looked really awesome to see her throwing kicks and using throws and these different types of movements from other martial arts styles besides straight boxing. So I do hope they get back to that more and more and more, which they are. In Volume 5, we see clearly that she is changing her style up somewhat, except in the Haven fight. In the Haven fight, she kind of lost that. Like, she was very rigid in the Haven fight. She only threw a few punches, and she just looked like a little bit clumsy, awkward, but the best way to put it is how I did already. She just looked rigid. She didn't look fluid. In the bandit camp fight, when she took on all those bandits, she looked fluid. She looked on point. She used different moves and like different styles. But at Haven, it was different. Now that said, well, I don't want to get into the Haven fight right now. I'm kind of going to be talking about that in a little bit. We'll cover that again later. Then there's the Emerald Forest where Yang and Blake fight the Ursa. Not much to talk about there. Team RWBY versus the Nevermore. I love that because that was a good fight. Just straight up, she jumps into the Nevermore's mouth, holds it open with one hand, which is pretty dang impressive, and then like fires Ember Celica into the mouth of the friggin' bird of the Nevermore. It's like, I hope you're hungry or something, she says, like firing the shotgun rounds into it. I think that's going to be like one of the classic Yang scenes that everybody remembers, even if hypothetically RWBY goes to like Volume 10 or even like Volume 15. I think still one of her most iconic scenes will be that Nevermore fight where she's just launching shells into the Nevermore's mouth, dude. It was some funny stuff. That was a good scene. Team RWBY versus Team Juniper in the best day ever, the food fight. So that was pretty cool. She had them freaking, what did she have? Turkeys, I think it was. That's right, turkeys on her hands, and she did put in some work there. She beat Ren pretty solidly, but yeah, it was not so much to take away for Yang there. Painting the town, Team RWBY, Sun, and Neptune versus Roman Torchwick. So that was a good fight. Obviously, Yang was one of the highlights of that. Yang took all that damage. RWBY said something really interesting in that fight, too. She said, don't worry. And I'm paraphrasing this, basically. You know, Weiss or Blake was showing concern for Yang about how Yang took that big hit from the Paladin, smacked into the concrete. Like, it took a lot of damage. But RWBY says, don't worry. That's what makes her special. The fact that she can, like, get stronger when she takes damage. But it's interesting choice of words that RWBY would say that's what makes her special, not that's her semblance. In a world where you go to primary school to learn about semblance and aura and all these basic things, and then you go to the secondary school, the main school, academy, to actually like develop all that. Everybody who's at Beacon knows what a semblance is. You learn about that in primary school. So why would RWBY say that's what makes her special and not just say, yeah, that's her semblance. Her semblance lets her take damage and get stronger. And it does more than that. I'll get into that. I'll get into her semblance in more detail. I'm just quoting RWBY right now. I always thought that was a really interesting choice of words. It's like, is that a hint that Yang's semblance is actually something different? Is her semblance actually not the, what we think it is? Is that actually something that makes her special? Is that a different ability entirely that she has and her semblance actually does something else? Probably not. It's probably just a weird choice of words. But, with Rooster Teeth, you never know. They do these things intentionally to kind of like divert attention and then throw you off later and give you like a twist, which I love them for. I think it keeps everybody kind of interested in the show and whatnot. Anyways, Team RWBY versus Grimm and Search and Destroy. Not much takeaway there. I'm just going to kind of skip through more important highlight fights, which obviously the next one would be Yang versus Neo. Yang versus Neo, man, that was a good fight. Yang got stomped though, straight up. She got absolutely wrecked by Neo. I mean, like, dude, it was not even close. Yang didn't land a single good hit on Neo. Neo didn't really ever have her aura flicker. She never even, her aura never went down, let alone flickered. So she never took any strong hits. And she just toyed with Yang. She looked like she was toying with her the whole time. So this kind of falls back to the theme of Yang struggling against kicking opponents. Neo is not really a kicking opponent entirely. She uses a lot of kicks, but she's so tiny and she has such short legs that it's not a good idea to be a kicking-based character when you have that kind of body style. So the kind of character that Neo is to me is more of a versatile fighter in the sense that she actually does use a lot of throws. She uses a lot of combinations between her body movements and also the umbrella to have a very defensive fighting style and then throw opponents for immense damage, which is actually how Yang got knocked out fighting Neo. Neo threw her into the roof, and that was the final blow. Then she was taking the sword out of the blade out of the umbrella and got ready to finish her off. So this is a Yang breakdown, but it's definitely important to note about how Neo beat Yang so badly so we can analyze what Yang did wrong and what caused her to lose that fight so badly. So basically, it comes down to Yang's attitude. That's part of why Yang lost that fight so badly. And again, I'm giving Neo a lot of credit here because we need to analyze Yang and what she did wrong. And then we can look at what Yang's doing currently that makes her better. And hypothetically, if Neo fought current Yang, maybe it would be different. But let's start by analyzing what Yang did wrong. And again, I want to reiterate, that was her personality to begin with. She let Neo get in her head, which Neo is very good at, especially for a character that doesn't talk. She knows how to get right into the opponent's head using her body language, her sarcastic expressions, and just her fighting style. It would just annoyed Yang so much. You could tell that Yang was legitimately annoyed. She threw any technique she had out the window because she just wanted to overpower Neo and just smash her. She really, really let Neo get in her head badly. And Neo could tell that she was getting into her head and only amplified that more and more and more with the things that she does. For example, the way Neo sat down, right? When in the middle of the fight, Neo just sits down and like crosses her legs and has a smirk. Like, what are you going to do? Yang comes all the way up to her and just does the most obvious thing that Neo could tell Yang was going to do. What am I talking about? Of coming up with a freaking haymaker. Yang just walks up to Neo and throws a haymaker, the most telegraphed punch you can do. So she completely negated the fact that Neo was sitting down and in a vulnerable position by doing exactly what Neo wanted. She let Neo get into her head. She just used her anger and just wanted to beat her, so she threw a haymaker. Neo countered it and got the advantage once again. What Yang could have done there was, I don't know, taken Ember Celica, shot it at the thing that Neo was sitting on, caused Neo to move, predicted Neo's movements, and launched an attack there. So she could have shot Ember Celica at the thing Neo was sitting on, predicting Neo to move, and as soon as she launched that, she could set herself up to be in the good distance for where Neo was going to go, and have a combo thrown at that area, probably tagged her with it, and maybe change the pace of the fight. Instead, the pacing of the fight stayed the same, and Neo just kept the advantage and got more and more of an advantage because Yang was just losing her cool. So it really comes down not to Yang's fighting style entirely, but more so Yang's personality, which does correlate to the fighting style. But I'm saying even if Yang had that same exact fighting style, if she kept a more level head, I think she would have done a lot better against Neo. She probably would have still lost just because Neo at that current point in time was quite a bit superior to Yang. Again, Yang nowadays versus Neo would be much more interesting, but at the end of the day, that's kind of the summary of that fight and why she lost so badly. Let's move on to like the next really important fight to notice, which is probably going to be Team RWBY versus Team Auburn, maybe. The only thing I really have to say about that I liked was the way Yang finished Team Auburn. You saw a great combination of Team RWBY's synergy. You have Weiss making the ice wall. You have Blake using Gamble Shroud as a slingshot, kind of. Not so much a slingshot as it was just like tension. You know, she threw it to Yang. Yang grabs on. Yang runs up to the ice wall ramp thing that Weiss created, uses Ember Celica to boost herself, plus the Gamble Shroud momentum, and it let her do a crazy good combo that won them the fight. So that was a great synergy between Team RWBY. That was a great job on Yang's part for just knowing exactly what to do, finishing the fight there. Good on Weiss, good on Blake, good on Yang, and good on RWBY for calling it out and getting them, you know, getting Team RWBY so good at synergizing together, which I really hope we get more of in Volume 6, man. We haven't had that good Team RWBY synergy action since Volume 3. There was none of it in Volume 4. Frankly, there was none of it in Volume 5 either. The only time they did it was off screen, unfortunately. All right, the next main fight, Flynt, Yang and Weiss against Flynt and Neon. This is a little bit different for me to analyze because Yang did indeed lose her cool, but this time it worked out, which is probably not good long term because it gave Yang the wrong idea, and that's part of why Yang lost to Adam. So I guess it could be a good showcase. So yeah, Yang and Weiss versus Flynt and Neon. Weiss got beaten. Neon got under Yang's skin. I mean, before Weiss even got beat, Neon was getting under Yang's skin pretty well, calling her top heavy and things like that, calling her clumsy and things like that. Yang let Neon get under her skin. She wasn't fighting very well, and surely enough, Weiss ended up losing. And then it was a 2-on-1. Yang took some damage. She was upset. Her summons activated, and she was able to overpower both Neon and Flynt Cole, but it was a sloppy fight. It was kind of a mess. Crow even commented, I don't remember if it was this fight, he commented on Team Sun's fight. I remember he said that was a sloppy mess. And I think he commented on Never Miss a Beat. I forget though, to be honest. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't. I think the other one he commented on was the Juniper fight. Juniper versus Auburn, I think it was, if I recall. So yeah, it wasn't this. But point is, even like he didn't directly say that, he still implied that he wasn't really impressed after the tournament was over and they were like chilling and whatnot. And then Ty even goes to say that, you know, it was a sloppy fight. Every one of Yang's fights were kind of sloppy because she relied on her semblance so much. So that was definitely the case with Team RWBY versus Team Auburn. Versus Flynt and Yang and Weiss against Flynt on Neon. It was definitely the case there. She relied on her semblance to get the win. Yang versus Mercury, once again, she relied on her semblance to get the win. Now, I do honestly think that Mercury threw this fight. I do think Mercury could have beat Yang pretty easily at that point in time. Now, let's go and give Yang some credit in Volume 5. We see that Yang has achieved quite a bit of strides since that fight in Volume 5. She's trained with Tai Yang. She's got the new arm. She's managed to control her personality, her anger better, and use her semblance better, and just fight smarter. So, based off what we saw of Mercury and Emerald fighting in Volume 5, I feel like Mercury didn't really get any stronger while Yang did. So I think a much more interesting fight would be Mercury versus Yang one-on-one, Volume 5 stats. I think that would be really interesting. I do think Volume 3 stats for Yang and Mercury, that Mercury has a definitive edge, and I think he would win that pretty much 10 out of 10. I don't think there's a fight where he'd really lose to Yang with Volume 3 stats. Whole different story, Volume 5, though. I just want to reiterate, I do think Yang would probably beat Mercury one-on-one in Volume 5 stats, based off Mercury's poor showing and based off the upgrades that we see Yang go through Volume 4 and Volume 5. That said, we haven't had much screen time of Mercury, especially fights in Volume 4 and Volume 5. So it might just be not having a good showcase. Maybe he did get stronger. Maybe he was training, but we don't really know for sure. The next important fight to take note of is actually, I didn't really comment on Yang versus Mercury that much, more so just why she lost, but there's not that much extra to comment on. Similar showing to her other fights, except the yellow trailer, just very high boxing style. And, you know, again, this kind of goes back to what Monty said. Yang struggles against kicking opponents. So yeah, Mercury's a kicking-based opponent. This was Volume 3 Yang, not Volume 5 Yang. So yeah, I don't think Yang would win that. Just to, you know, comment a little bit more detailed there. The next really important fight is going to be Blake and Yang versus Adam. That is going to be much more important for me to talk about in the semblance area of this video, which we're going to get into. Well, I think we already covered that, actually. That's right. That was like one of the first. Actually, wait, hold on. We talked about history. We talked about personality. We talked about weapons. We didn't actually talk about her semblance, did we? I think I skipped over the semblance. Yeah, I skipped over the semblance segment of this video. My bad. We still need to talk about her semblance. But we're in the middle of the fighting segment. I kind of messed that up. There's not too many fights left. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to backtrack after we discuss the last few fights. I'll backtrack to the semblance because Yang's semblance is actually really interesting. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Let's see. So what fight did we leave off on? Yang versus Mercury we talked about. Yang versus Adam. Okay, there we go. So yeah, Yang versus Adam was not really much of a fight. And there's not much to discuss. You guys know what happened. You saw what happened. And it's going to be more important for me to discuss this when we go into the semblance area. So I'm going to skip that for now. And we'll get into more details in the semblance segment coming right up. The next important fight is Yang versus the Bandits, which I indirectly talked about already. She stomped them. She had a much better fighting style then. It was more similar to her yellow trailer fighting style. So that was really good to see. And I'm not going to really comment on that because I've already talked about it a lot in regards to her development and her fighting style changing over time. Yang vs. Mercury round 2, I've also commented on indirectly already, so we don't really need to comment on that. I mentioned, you know, everything I wanted to on that in regards to Yang vs. Mercury Volume 3 stats, how that would go, Yang vs. Mercury Volume 5 stats, and how that would go. The next thing is really Yang vs. Mercury and Emerald. That's not really a different fight. That's kind of the same fight, so not much to comment on that. I'm kind of lumping those together. Now, that said, you know, obviously Yang was fighting 2 opponents at once, but that's part of why I don't think Mercury really improved because he should have stomped Yang, man. Like, Mercury and Emerald working together should destroy Yang. Like, Mercury was 2v1 in Coco and Yatsuhashi. And Yatsuhashi is actually a pretty strong character. He has some of the highest strength feats in the entire show out of any character. Like, he's actually got very nice strength stats. Coco is not good against human opponents. That's pretty obvious. But still, Mercury was 2v1ing them easily. I do think Mercury with Emerald, like, dude, all Emerald had to do was create smarter illusions, and Mercury just needs to land some good hits on Yang in Volume 5. They didn't do that. I don't know why. That was some weird stuff. The way Mercury and Emerald were not able to put down Yang quickly, that was just weird to me. I just don't understand. That's why I do think Yang was buffed and they weren't. But we'll see, like I said. Anyways, that is all of the, that's the whole fighting style segment of this video. So we're going to move right on into the semblance segment because this is important. I've actually made a video about why Yang's semblance is different in Volume 5 than it has been in Volume 4, 3, 2, and 1. Take a look in the description. I'll put the video link in the description. I suggest you to watch that video. I put a lot of work into it. It's really good. It's actually got a lot of views. It's got like 50K views. It's done really well. It's the type of video where you don't really see me at all. It's a lot of clips and video clips and whatnot. So it's a fun watch. Link down below. It's only a few minutes long. That said, we're going to talk about the semblance here anyway, but I'm just saying, if you haven't seen that, I think you should watch it. I think it's one of my better videos. It's interesting. Anyways, so Yang's semblance. Yang's semblance is... It's weird. We have heard conflicting things about it from different characters, and not just heard conflicting things, but have seen conflicting things. Her semblance does different things. What do I mean by that? Her semblance is essentially a damage boost / damage buff. It's like a buff that she puts on herself. But Tai Yang said her semblance is the ability to take damage and dish it back twice as hard. Not really what we see her doing with her semblance, though. That is similar. What Tai described Yang's semblance as is actually a little bit more similar to what Adam's semblance is. Hold on. Adam's semblance Moonslice allows him to basically absorb kinetic energy and store it and unleash it and augment that energy with his own innate energy to make for a very powerful attack. Yang's semblance is not really how Tai Yang stated, which, you know, he said, again, the ability to dish damage back twice as hard as she takes it. I think he may have just been using like a figure of speech. You know how Tai Yang is kind of a goofball. I mean, he wasn't really goofing around that much in that scene, but he kind of was because his example of like going instead of going through problems, you need to go around them. He was like pointing at Zwei and like walked around Zwei. So he was serious, but he still, you know, has a little bit of goofiness to him. It was a funny example. So I feel like what Tai said about Yang's semblance was not really the end all of how her semblance works, because as we see it acting in the show, it is different. The way that we see her semblance acting in the show is that there's two ways to activate it. And they do go hand in hand to activate it to its full potential. But we see Yang activate her semblance on more than one occasion without even taking damage. Good example of that is the Adam fight, Adam versus Yang, which I said we would talk about more. And this is why we're going to talk about it more, because Yang activates her semblance there at the fullest extent. What do I mean by fullest extent? Well, let's backtrace slightly. Before we get into discussion about what happened with Adam and Yang, let's discuss the stages of Yang's semblance. So Yang's semblance seems to have these stages. Her eyes will turn red. Eventually, her hair will start glowing. Her hair will start becoming fiery. And then at the furthest point of her semblance, fire itself will form around her, almost like a fire aura. So it's weird because when she fought Adam, wasn't much of a fight, she immediately went to the final stage of her semblance. Her eyes were red, her hair was glowing and fiery, and the fire was bursting around her, and she leapt at Adam. She didn't take damage. She didn't dish damage back twice as hard. She had a damage buff placed on her from her semblance, and she put it all into one attack. I'm not saying, you know, let me rephrase that. She put all her hope into one attack, but she didn't put her semblance in one attack because that's not how her semblance works. It is more like a passive buff. It will make her stronger. It'll make her more powerful, quicker. I mean, we don't know about quicker, but there's a correlation between speed and power and speed, so maybe it would, but mostly let's just say it makes her more powerful, just for the sake of argument's sake. So it's weird because it conflicts with what Tai Yang said. The things that we've seen her semblance do in the show conflicts with what Tai Yang stated her semblance to be. So I'm curious about that. And then if we go back to what RWBY said, that's what makes Yang special. It really does almost seem to me like Rooster Teeth is hinting that Yang might have a special circumstance to her where she has a semblance, but she also has another ability, or her semblance is more than one thing, which is weird. You know, we see that the Shinies have a weird thing going on with their semblance. We've seen that semblance can change and evolve. We haven't really seen a character with two semblances. The only one who might really is Ozpin, because Oscar and Ozpin, you know, but even that's kind of hearsay right now. So potentially, maybe, I mean, before we get into that, we also see characters like Raven and Crow who have this magic ability to change into birds, but then they also have their semblance. So maybe, just maybe, Yang's semblance is the kind of semblance that does more than one thing. I'm just saying, maybe she is special like RWBY said, and maybe it wasn't just a weird choice of lines. But that's a whole different theory. This is more of a factual thing, so take that with a grain of salt. The fact is, her semblance seems to have these stages. Again, her eyes turn red, her hair glows, she gets fiery hair, and then she gets fire. Her power output gets buffed. That's the definitive facts of what we see her semblance do. Everything else is kind of just going to be speculative about what I said about it. And then we do see she goes through some changes in Volume 5. She gets more control over her emotions, and since her semblance correlates directly with her emotions, again, Adam versus Yang, we see that her semblance changes because she's able to manipulate her emotions somewhat to give herself that buff without losing her level head. For example, if she wanted to get in a fight, but she didn't take damage yet, but she wanted her semblance to activate, she could think about something that makes her upset, but deep down inside, internally, she knows that she's only getting upset because she wants it to be. So it's not like she's losing control of herself exactly, but she's getting that emotion, which activates her semblance. So we're seeing in Volume 5 that Yang is becoming much more intricate in her semblance use, and we're getting hints that down the road, she will be able to activate her semblance on and off more and more to greater extents without actually taking damage and without actually losing her cool, just manipulating her emotions internally while keeping her level head to give herself that damage buff. So it's really interesting stuff. I think it's really cool. And again, check that video out down below for more examples and more discussion on that theory. It's pretty cool. We talked about the fighting style already. I went back into the semblance segment. We talked about the fights. The next segment of this video will be the relationships. And obviously, there's one relationship in particular that the fandom loves to get heated about. But we're going to start with Team Stark. So, Yang looked up to Summer very much. She said that Summer was like super mom. She obviously took some inspiration from Summer in terms of how she wanted to raise RWBY and how close she is with RWBY. Unfortunately, the relationship between Summer and Yang was very short-lived, though. Yeah, it's a pretty sad topic. Her relationship with Tai Yang. I talked about this earlier already. She was picking up a lot of the slack for Tai when Tai withdrew, when Raven left. Tai wasn't really doing much parenting. Yang picked up that slack. But even so, Yang has no resentment towards Tai Yang for that. I'm sure some kids would resent their parents quite a bit for having to become the father and the mother, and the parent actually just not doing much. But the fact is, we can assume that Tai did do a lot for Yang, and there was only a hopefully brief period of time where Tai wasn't really doing anything, because Yang did forgive him for that. Maybe not even forgive, because she never even really held it against him. And Tai and Yang do have a really good close relationship. They are really close. They love each other greatly. They play off each other perfectly. They're very similar in many ways. They get along very well. They have a very, very, very good relationship. Tai and Yang do. Yang and RWBY. Well, I mean, actually, RWBY's not on Team Stark. We'll get to that in a second. Crow and Yang. Crow is very close with Yang. Not as close as he is with RWBY, but he is close with Yang. He has little nicknames for her, like Firecracker. But he sees Yang as a more mature person, and it's how do I put this? Crow definitely acknowledges everything that Yang went through in raising RWBY, in her own development, in Raven running away and whatnot. I think Crow might feel slightly guilty about Raven running away since it's his sister, and the fact that Yang grew up without a mom. As when Summer passed away, then really she grew up without a mom or a dad for a while there. But I think Crow respects Yang a lot. Crow thinks that she's mature. Crow loves Yang, but he definitely took a different approach towards his involvement with RWBY and his involvement with Yang. And that could be, we could theorize on that, having to do with Summer, having to do with the relationship between Crow and Summer, to theorize on that. I'm not saying Crow's RWBY's dad, but who knows? There's a lot of theories there that we can get into, but that would get off topic. So let's move on. That's how Yang feels about Team Stark. Oh, I didn't mention Raven, though. That's kind of important. So yeah, Raven and Yang. When Yang was a kid, she seemed to have this... She always wanted to find Raven, even when she was a teenager, even when she was coming into late teens. She always wanted to find her mother. She looked up to her mother, it seems. Based off the dialogue that we have in Volume 5, we can really make a reasonable assumption that Yang looked up to Raven. Even though Raven wasn't there, she looked up to Raven as a huntress, and she kind of gave Raven the benefit of the doubt, thinking to herself, I do resent my mom abandoning my father and I, and RWBY, honestly, too, because RWBY would have needed a mother figure there. I resent her for doing all that, but I respect her as a huntress, a fully fledged huntress, and I want to give her the benefit of the doubt, and I want to believe that whatever she left us to do was super important, and I want to meet her one day, and I want to talk to her and get to know her, and I want to understand what was so important that she had to do. Was it some really important mission that she was on? What was it that was so important that Raven had to do, that she had to abandon us? Because I want her to love me, and I want to love her, and I want to know more about her, and I think that she's doing some really important stuff, and she must have had a really good reason for abandoning everybody. I think that's the attitude that Yang had, and part of why she wanted to find Raven for so long, and didn't seem to really resent Raven leaving. But the reality of the situation really hit home with Yang, and we see that Yang was wrong about Raven. She didn't have a very good reason, it seemed. I mean, she kind of did, because it depends on how you look at it. If you look at Raven leaving because she thought she was a maiden and didn't want to put a target on her family's back, then you could kind of make an argument for Raven having a good reason to leave. But the timing doesn't really add up for that. The timing between Summer's death, Raven leaving, Raven becoming a maiden. So it's really sketchy. The fact is this. In Volume 5, Yang actually meets Raven, at the camp, not impressed by her, thinks that, she decides that she's over it. She doesn't even really care about Raven anymore. She just wants to use Raven to get to her sister. All she cares about at the moment is protecting RWBY and getting to RWBY. She really is not feeling it with her mother at that point. And then in Haven, in the vault room, that the emotions are really laid on the table. It's just the two of them alone in the vault by the relic. And Raven admits some things to Yang that Yang kind of forces out of her because she can tell. She has good intuition. She can tell that Raven is hiding something in referring to the fact that she murdered the previous Spring Maiden to steal the powers and become the Spring Maiden herself. Now, you can't just steal powers unless you have like a Grim Arm or a Parasite like Cinder does. Raven doesn't have that. So I think, the slight sidetrack here, I think the Spring Maiden trusted Raven enough that she actually let Raven kill her, and she intentionally thought of Raven in her dying thoughts so that the powers would go to Raven, which also fits the fact that Cinder said the Spring Maiden must have trusted you a great deal before she died, because she did. This is how I think it played out, man. I think it played out just like that, which is crazy to think about. Like, Raven just tried to train the Spring Maiden for so long, but she just wasn't the kind of person to be a fighter. She explained it to Spring. Spring agreed and actually sacrificed herself, basically, to entrust Raven with the Spring Maiden powers, because if she died at a different moment, the powers could just go to someone else. So I think Raven just straight up told her, like, we need to kill you. It's the best thing for the tribe. It's the best thing for the powers. It's the best thing for, the world. Sounds so messed up. So think about me in your dying thoughts, and I'll do it right now. Are you okay with that? And the Spring Maiden, who knows? Maybe she wasn't okay with it right away, but the fact is she became okay with it and let Raven kill her. There is a slight side argument that someone can make in the fact that maybe Raven just murdered the Spring Maiden out of nowhere. And since the dying, quoting Ozpin or Glinda, I forget which one, I think it was Ozpin, quoting one of them, one of the Oz Illuminati people, it's often that one of the people that's been murdered, if someone gets murdered, it's oftentimes that their final thoughts are of the person that murdered them. So you can make that argument for Raven and the Spring Maiden, but I think that's relying way too much on chance even still. So I do think it's much more likely that Raven had a discussion with the Spring Maiden. The Spring Maiden agreed, and it was a consensual murder. That sounds super weird, but yeah, that's basically what happened. She consented to being murdered by Raven and thought of Raven in her dying thoughts so the powers would go to her. But yeah, it was a slight sidetrack there. Actually, a big sidetrack. What do we even leave off on? Oh, yeah. The Yang and Raven talk in the vault room. So once Yang grabs the relic, she starts crying. And I think part of the reason why she was crying is because she was so disappointed with her mother. She had built her mother up in her mind. She internally even defended her mother's leaving, trying to justify it, trying to understand why she did that. But the reality of the situation was much different than Yang imagined. And she didn't agree with her mother. She didn't find her mother as strong. She even straight up said, "You're not strong. That doesn't make you strong." It's like everything that she thought her mother was, she wasn't. And she just cried because of all that and the whole messed up situation going on right now with everything in the world, and especially her mother, though. She was very disappointed in Raven. We'll see how the relationship develops as the time goes on, though. But at the moment, they definitely have a lot of problems to work out. All right, moving on. So Yang and Team RWBY, obviously, except the last part of RWBY being Yang, because we're not going to talk about Yang's personality with Yang, or relationship with Yang. So Yang's relationship with RWBY, there's all the history that I've already talked about Yang taking a motherly role. Currently, the easiest way to sum up their relationship would be that Yang is very close to RWBY. She fully supports RWBY. She has full faith in RWBY, and she just wants to be there for her, and she trusts RWBY's judgment better than anybody else's, to be honest. She trusts RWBY's judgment better than anybody else at the moment, and she just wants to be by RWBY's side and to protect her and to, try to make the world a better place along with RWBY. RWBY and Weiss. And I'm kind of hurrying a little bit now because this is a 43-minute video, which is crazy, man. These breakdowns really drag on. I don't want to say drag on because that makes it seem like I'm wasting time. I'm not wasting time, man. There's just a lot to talk about in these breakdowns. It's really fun. A quick side note for anybody watching this, don't hesitate to put a character breakdown video of mine on a podcast. You don't really need to be watching it. If you want, you can just listen to it and work on your homework or something. I'm just saying that's not a bad idea because they are kind of like podcasts almost, in the sense that they are long and just pretty much strictly audio, unless you really enjoy watching my posters and me mess with my hair, I guess. But yeah, anyways, so Yang's relationship with Weiss, despite them not having a lot of screen time together, the screen time that they have had together is actually pretty important because it shows that they are actually really close. Yang and Weiss worked together to organize the whole Beacon dance event for the rest of the team. They reunited at the Volume 5 camp. They hugged. They were super happy to see each other. And then in Volume 5, when they were at Haven, before the fight went down, there was that really heart-to-heart moment where Weiss explained her history, her past to Yang, tried to help Yang, get over her resentment towards Blake, and really eased Yang's mind. And Yang talked about her history and whatnot, and they really had a heart-to-heart moment there. I remember after that episode, dude, a lot of people were making Freezer Burn fan art, talking about Freezer Burn. For a brief moment, Freezer Burn was probably talked about more than what's it called? Bumblebee. In terms of Yang ships, obviously Bumblebee's like the most popular one, but for a brief moment, people were talking about Freezer Burn more than they were talking about Bumblebee. So that was definitely an important scene that we got to take note of. Speaking of Bumblebee, Yang's relationship with Blake, that relationship can vary greatly depending on who you ask. I don't want to really get into details on this relationship because I don't want to start any shipping wars or anything like that. But the fact is, Blake is a very important character in Yang's life. Some of the notable moments between them include the scene where they're in the classroom alone together, and Yang admits to Blake some of the stuff that she went through with RWBY, with the Beowulfs approaching and the mistakes that Yang made in her past, and, you know, trying to really get Blake to not run away, but to confront her problems and to understand that there are people there for her, and she's not alone. So there's a great moment between Yang and Blake there. She asked Blake to the dance. They ended up having a nice dance together. And in Volume 3, Yang was hurt greatly when Blake left. Yang wanted Blake to be there for her. Blake left. Yang showed great, like, PTSD physically, but also some emotional trauma because of how Blake just kind of abandoned her when she needed her the most. She just ran away, according to Yang. But like I said, that freezer burn scene really helped Yang get over it due to Weiss comforting her. Another really important scene is the tournament when Yang actually, you know, hit Mercury in the leg thanks to Emerald's illusions and whatnot. Blake didn't believe that Yang. She did believe her, but she was skeptical when Yang said that it was an accident or like something caused it, some manipulation happened. Like, she didn't actually do that. Blake, when Yang said, like, do you believe me, Blake? Blake gave her a very bad answer, which was, I want to, implying that she doesn't. But then after they talked it out a little bit, she said, I will believe you, then I'll put my faith in you, etc., etc., etc. And then like shortly after that, Yang loses her arm and Blake runs away. So that's part of why Yang was so like upset about that too. And then of course there's the reunion in Volume 5 where Yang and Blake make eye contact. Yang's pupils are literally like shaking because she's like, oh my god, it's Blake. Oh my god, oh my god. And there's no dialogue exchange, but you can tell it's a powerful moment. And actually, my favorite part about that is the way Blake looks to RWBY afterwards. It's like, I love that scene so much. And this is going to diverge slightly from the Yang character breakdown because it's a different topic. But the way that Blake looked to RWBY and RWBY nodded to Blake and then Blake turned around and went back to the craziness outside, I think that spoke volumes about the relationship between all the girls on Team RWBY. It's like Blake went to Haven with her own agenda. Her own agenda being to stop Adam from, you know, blowing up the school and to take down the White Fang and to take down Adam, along with the Fauna's army that she brought, along with her parents and her best friend Ilya. Feels weird saying that still. I mean, I don't know, man. Best friend who wants to turn you into somebody who's going to kill you, torture you, and get your parents killed. Blake is a much more forgiving person than I am, to be honest. But anyways, that's off topic about the off topic thing that we're talking about. So I love how Blake looked to RWBY as if to say, it's great to see you all, but there's some crazy shit outside I gotta get to. RWBY nodded like she understood, and Blake left. So that whole scene had very little dialogue between the eyes locking between Yang and Blake, and then Blake looking to RWBY, RWBY nodding, and Blake running away. There was no dialogue exchanged between those characters, really. But it was such a powerful scene, and I gotta give Rooster Teeth major props because that's honestly probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. That simple exchange of expressions between those three girls was just so freaking perfect. And it said so much in such little time without even saying anything. It was just a great scene. Moving on to the relationship with Team Juniper. So there's not much to talk about here, except Yang and Jaune. Yang doesn't think very highly of Jaune at the moment, but she did encourage RWBY to be friends with him. So that was cool. Yang and Ren don't really have there's not really anything about Yang and Ren to go off at all, to be honest. Yang and Pyrrha, there wasn't many scenes between the two of them, but Yang has great respect for Pyrrha and admiration, and she stuck up for Pyrrha because when RWBY saw Jaune doing some good stuff in the tournament, RWBY was like, wow, Jaune has improved a lot. And then Yang was like, yeah, but he's still no match for Pyrrha. And the way she said Pyrrha, it was like, you could tell that like Yang admired Pyrrha and thought, you know, respected Pyrrha. The only character on Team Juniper, though, well, not the only, but like, let me rephrase that. The character on Team Juniper that Yang seems to have the most scenes with is actually Nora. You had Nora kind of goofing around with Yang in Volume 2 where she was throwing the food in her mouth and Yang was like catching it. And then you had the arm wrestling in Volume 5. Nora and Yang kind of goofing around. Nora's like, I don't believe you about the arm being so strong. Like, they arm wrestle. Yang detaches it. Nora goes flying around. They're all laughing, having a good time. Both of them are similar in that they're high energy characters, though Nora is probably higher energy and more of a goofball, obviously. But Yang is a goofball. She likes her punch. She has high energy. She's a physical-based character. Nora's a physical-based character. So there's definitely similarities there, and they play off each other very, very well. It's interesting. Nora and Team Sun, there's not much to go off at all. I'm sorry, Yang and Team Sun. Yang and Sun himself, they didn't have much, interaction. The biggest interaction for someone on Team Sun was Neptune. Yang and Neptune actually worked together briefly when they were tracking down the White Fang and whatnot. And then they ended up tracking down Roman to the Paladin. Yang and Neptune initiated the fight against the Paladin. And then Neptune just left. So Yang really was not impressed by Neptune. And she probably doesn't really like Neptune that much, to be honest, because Neptune tries so hard and Yang showed no interest in him. And then the fact that Sun and Neptune straight up abandoned Team RWBY. They straight up abandoned Team RWBY, man. Sun and Neptune were there when RWBY was fighting the mech. And then they just left. Like, yeah, they got separated, but they could have looked for Team RWBY. It's not going to be hard to find the freaking team of 4 magical girls and the giant freaking robot on the freeway firing missiles and dust attacks at each other. Like, dude, that's not going to be hard to find that at all. You can hear it miles away probably and see it. Instead, what does Sun and Neptune do? Oh, they'll be fine. Let's go get some ramen. And they just leave them, dude. They leave them. What if they weren't fine, dude? Neo was there too, man. What if Neo arrived sooner? I mean, who knows what would have happened? Maybe they wouldn't have been fine, man. Maybe they wouldn't have been fine. They definitely could have used the help. But yeah, Neptune and Sun just left. So I don't think Yang really likes Neptune that much. And the rest of Team Sun, there's not much to talk about. Other characters that Yang has really had contact with, not many, but the one that we really got to take note of is Ironwood. Because when Yang's first interaction with Ironwood was not good, the first time she met him, at least on screen for us, was when she hit Mercury in the leg in the Vital Tournament. All that, drama went down. And Ironwood, he basically reprimanded Yang. And they didn't start off on a good foot, but Ironwood really made that up afterwards because he's the one that commissioned Yang's new RWBY belt. He's the one that got it done so quickly, and even though they made it quickly, they did an amazing job on it. It's a very nice piece of the most recent, up-to-date Atlas tech, so it's the top of the top that they can make for her. They got it done as quickly as possible and sent it to her as quickly as possible so she could get it as quickly as possible, and he went on to even say, he admires Yang for being a huntress, and he appreciated the work that she put in the defensive beacon. So yeah, that is all the relationships. So that's actually the end of the character breakdown, guys. That is the end of it. We talked about the history, the personality, the weapons, the semblance, the fighting styles, the relationships, all that stuff. That's gonna be the end of this. I'm trying to see if there's any trivia that I wrote down really quick, little pieces of information that is kind of cute or whatever. But I don't see any. I forgot to write it down. Hold on, let me actually pull up a different document here and scroll all the way down. So yeah, okay, so there is a little bit of trivia. I guess this is just pulled straight from the wiki though. So in family, Tien calls Yang his sunny little dragon. Yang's name may be a reference to Bruce Lee, who was given the name Xiao Long. I actually did not know that, and I'm a big Bruce Lee fan. Holy smokes, I did not know that, guys. Bruce Lee's given name is Xiao Long. So that's actually sick. Yang's name, it might indeed be a reference to Bruce Lee. I mean, they're both martial artists. Both have more of Yang is more of a physical-based fighting style than a lot of characters because she uses her fists a lot. I think that's pretty legit. Despite having a Chinese name, Yang's given name and surname are inverted. Yang would be the surname, and her given name would be Xiao Long. Furthermore, Chinese surnames are usually only one character. This can be explained by Remnant not following real world customs. Okay, it's not much trivia. It's just obvious. Despite Yang's name being Chinese, it is not pronounced in typical Chinese. Okay, this trivia is not so interesting at this point. But this part's interesting. The characters that appear on the official t-shirt released by Rooster Teeth Parody and Akira. That's sick. For those of you who don't know what that means, I think that's really cool. It's the Akira. Akira is the freaking not okay. How do I put this? If you don't know what Akira is, look it up, man. It's one of the best anime movies ever made. It's about this kid who I'm not even going to describe right now. It would take way too long, but it's a really good movie. One of the famous posters for that movie is this character Kaneda with his biker outfit looking at his bike, and it just says Akira, and it's his back facing the screen looking at his bike. So they did a similar thing with Yang. They showed Yang's back facing the viewer of the screen and Bumblebee, the bike, right there. So it was a mirror of Akira. So that's actually pretty cool trivia. I thought that was really cool when they the way they did that. According to Lindsay Jones, Yang's power comes from her hair, similar to the story of Samson and Delilah. So again, we have some conflicting information about how Yang's semblance works and everything. Indeed, though, her power does have to do with her hair. And there's that joke that the first time Yang like got a haircut, she went crazy, you know. So I mean, it's interesting. Anyways, that's about it for the trivia. There's a few other more little things, but nothing that interesting. Here's something kind of funny. At the RTX Australia panel, Yang's Skype username was Fireballin17. That's pretty funny there. Anyways, guys, that's going to be the end. We're actually at the almost at the hour mark, though. Is there any way I could stretch this video on for 5 minutes? I probably could, but I'm at the end of my ideas for Yang here. But that would just be sick to have a 1 hour long video, dude. That'd be legit. I don't know, guys. I might just ramble on for the next 5 minutes. I guess, basically, let's see. Consider this the end of the Yang character breakdown, but I'm going to ramble on for 5 more minutes just because I think it would be cool to have a 1 hour long video on my channel dedicated specifically to Yang, even though I'm cheating with the last 5 minutes. I mean, come on, it is 5 minutes, dude. That's not even 10%. An hour is 60 minutes long. 10% of that would be 6 minutes. This is not even 10% of it, but I mean, like, I'm just going to ramble right now, but I'm going to look for something interesting about Yang. I don't know, man. We can talk about Taiyang a little bit. That's kind of related. So we don't really know what Taiyang's semblance is, but my boy Tiamat, shout out to you, Tiamat. He made a very interesting theory about Taiyang's semblance and his weapon. I forget what he said about his semblance, though. That was very, very detailed, and I'd have to look that up. But basically, my boy Tiamat thinks that Taiyang's semblance is actually, his weapon is actually a bow and arrow, because Taiyang wears like an archer's vambrace and guard or whatever it's called. The vambrace is definitely archer thing, but I forget. I think there's one other thing too that I referred to as the guard. I forget. Maybe it's all the vambrace. So I think that's pretty legit. But if Taiyang's weapon is really a bow, then why is he so good at hand-to-hand combat? Unless he just perfected hand-to-hand combat in case he ran out of arrows or he needed to go into close range. But then he could carry a sword or something, but I guess screw it. If you're really good at hand-to-hand, then why even burden yourself with carrying another weapon around if you already have a bow and arrows on your back? I guess you don't really need like a dagger or a sword or anything. You just fight hand to hand. So I think that's kind of a cool theory. Shout out to Time Matt again for that. Let's give some more shout outs here really quick. We actually got a new Patreon recently. Ratio HD, thank you for being a patron. Like I said, guys, I'm just going to ramble on until this hits the 1 hour mark. If you guys do want to support me on Patreon, that would be awesome. It definitely helps out. Ad revenue on YouTube is not great. A lot of my content is also copyright claimed, meaning I can't monetize it. So supporting me on Patreon definitely helps out. Link down below for that as well. If you guys want to, sign up there, I got some cool perks. Your name will be in the description of my videos. You'll get some early access to stuff. Now, the early access I'm still working out because, like I said at the beginning of this video, my Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood thing got copyrighted. So doing early access for reaction videos and stuff like that is very complicated on YouTube. There are some methods that I'm looking into and talking to other YouTubers about to getting some suggestions. So I'm going to be working on that. But if you're in my Discord channel, you'll get some really cool perks. You'll get a custom title. You'll get access to some custom rooms and whatnot. If you're not in the Discord, you can join that without even becoming a Patreon, by the way. My Discord is not like most YouTubers or RWBYtubers who make their Discord private and you got to, get behind a paywall. That's not the case for mine, dude. You can join my Discord. You don't need to pay me anything. Link down below. Join, have fun, talk about RWBY. And other things, like we have a whole anime channel and just like funny pictures and whatnot. So that's definitely interesting. I think you would enjoy it there. But yeah, talking about Patreon, you'll get a special rank. There's 2 different tiers. You can get a Patreon rank or a Hero Patreon rank if you do that. And Ascended Hero, you get a special Hero Patreon role. I told you about that. But you also get in-card credits. You've probably seen those if you watch the end of my videos. Not all my videos have in-cards, but the ones that do, your name will be there. So your name will be in the description, and it will also be in the video itself as a credit. So that's about it for the Patreon. I'm still trying to figure some things out for early access and whatnot. But hey, that took about 3 minutes. We killed 3 minutes talking about Patreon, so that's pretty cool. 2.5 more minutes. Man, it's so easy for me to ramble when I have a topic, but when I don't, I'm scrambling here to do some interesting stuff for you guys. I guess I'll just sip on some more coffee for a second here. And before anybody bashes me for rambling on for 5 minutes just to get my video to be an hour long, that's not scummy, man. I'm still providing content. I'm still talking. Some people will straight up put a freaking like black screen to suck up more time. You ever see those YouTubers who make like a 9-minute video, but then at the end just have like a black screen until it hits like 10 minutes in a few seconds because they're trying to like work the system? So that's definitely some shady stuff. I'm not even like, there's no extra benefit for me to have a video over an hour long. The threshold that YouTube looks at is about 10 minutes, but even that is debatable. The algorithm is constantly changing. I don't even think the 10-minute thing is nearly as important as it used to be. The only important thing about the 10-minute thing that's like confirmed is the fact that you can put ads in the middle of your video if it's over 10 minutes. If it's under 10 minutes, you can only put it at the beginning and the end, unless it's monetized by somebody and they can do whatever they want, kind of. But if it's over 10 minutes, then you can put ads in your video. So that's why a lot of YouTubers will do that, because they want to put ads in the middle of their video. Yeah, so what I'm doing is not even going to benefit me in that way. This is already over 10 minutes long. I just want it to look cool on my channel. Just see, like, you know, 1 hour Yang discussion. It's going to be freaking sick. So as we wrap this up, there's a few seconds left before we hit the 1 hour mark. I want to give a special shout out to all you guys for taking the time to watch this. Hitting that like button helps out too, by the way. So if you do that, I would appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this character breakdown. The next one will be Nora, I think. I've done RWBY. I've done Blake. Actually, have I done Blake? Did I do a Blake character breakdown? I don't remember, dude. That might have been one of the... I think I did, but it was a while ago. I've definitely done RWBY. I've definitely done Ren. I've done Jaune. Now I've done Yang. I'm pretty sure I've done Blake. I think I've done all of Team RWBY now, but I'm not really remembering the Blake character breakdown that well. So yeah, assuming I've done Blake, the next one will be Nora. And I'll probably do one on Pyrrha too, to be honest, because there's just a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about Pyrrha, even though she was only in Volume 1, 2, and 3. So I'll probably still do Pyrrha. Then we'll figure it out after that, man. Maybe Crow or Raven or something. I think that'd be fun, moving on to them. And I already did a breakdown on Tyrion. That was the first breakdown I ever did, but it wasn't called like character breakdown. It was just called like a discussion. So it's just like a little bit of a HeroHei trivia. I did a Tyrion breakdown before I did like Team RWBY or Juniper. That's kind of funny. Because it was after like we met Tyrion in Volume 4 and I was just like interested in him. Anyways, we're at the 1 hour mark now, guys. Thank you again very much for watching this video. And that's it. I'll catch you next time.